You'd be shocked to know that one of the most fundamental human drives is our ability to attract people into our lives who will slowly, agonizingly, and relentlessly chip away at our self-worth. This isn't a coincidence, but rather a symptom of a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior that stems from our earliest relationships with the people we're meant to trust the most. We've all been there. We know someone who seemed kind, caring, and genuinely interested in getting close to us, only to reveal a hidden side that left us shattered and confused. But what if I told you that this isn't just about finding flaws in the other person, but rather about revealing a darker, unspoken truth that we rarely acknowledge, even to ourselves, why it is that we consistently seek out people who crush our souls, and how we can break free from this toxic cycle? We're wired to respond to the void with reckless abandon, often finding ourselves inexplicably drawn to those who offer the very thing we desperately crave: validation, a feeling that we somehow matter. Their toxic energy becomes an intoxicating elixir, luring us deeper into the depths of its destructive undertow with every promise of validation, acceptance, and belonging, a potent cocktail that swiftly turns to poison in our veins. We're drawn to those who can awaken our dormant insecurities, who speak directly to the hidden crevices of our soul where our deepest fears reside, and offer a twisted sense of comfort in the familiarity of pain. The darker the personality, the brighter it seems to shine, casting a magnetic aura that draws us in with an inexorable force, a morbid fascination that's both alluring and terrifying at the same time, a reminder that our attraction to darkness often speaks to our own unresolved shadows. Their words are carefully crafted to ignite a fire within us, a burning desire to prove our worth, to earn their approval, and to be loved, a desperate plea for validation that swiftly spirals out of control as we become hopelessly entangled in the toxic web of their design. In our zeal to be seen and heard, we often sacrifice our own voice, our own agency, and our own well-being, surrendering to the very thing that threatens to consume us whole, a tragic reminder that our greatest weakness lies not in the toxic people we attract, but in our own profound need for love and validation. Our unconscious patterns of attraction are less about what we truly desire, and more about the perceived safety of familiarity, no matter how toxic or self-destructive that familiarity may be. When we're drawn to people who consistently push our buttons, it's not a sign of passion or intensity, but rather an indication that we're attempting to recreate a sense of control over the inevitable chaos that we've experienced in the past. In seeking validation from someone who may crush our souls, we're often unconsciously trying to prove to ourselves that we're worthy of love, acceptance, and connection, despite our deep-seated insecurities. One of the most insidious patterns of attraction is when we're drawn to someone who reminds us of ourselves, and we mistakenly believe that they'll somehow fix or change us. But in reality, we're only attracted to the idea of changing and becoming whole, rather than actively doing the work to change ourselves. Our attraction to someone who will ultimately destroy us is often rooted in a misguided need for excitement, a thrilling sense of uncertainty, and the promise of an intense emotional experience. But at the end of the day, this is nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid the monotony of our own stagnant lives. Here are 6 spoken sentences for the given section. When we're drawn to people who consistently disregard our well-being, it's often because we're trying to validate our own worth through external means, rather than recognizing it within ourselves. In reality, our choices aren't driven by love, but by the unyielding desire to recreate familiar patterns of pain and rejection, a twisted attempt at proving our own resilience. We may justify our behavior by labeling these toxic relationships as love or passion, but the truth lies in the fact that we're desperately seeking validation for our own deep-seated insecurities. What we term attraction is more often than not a thinly veiled attempt to control the uncontrollable aspects of our lives, to experience a fleeting sense of power and agency. We're drawn to individuals who will crush our souls because they validate our darkest fears, the very insecurities we've been struggling to confront within ourselves. This vicious cycle of self-deception is what allows us to perpetuate the same destructive patterns. Despite the devastating consequences, a desperate bid to cling onto the familiar, rather than risking the unknown and the true possibility of genuine healing. When we're drawn to people who will ultimately crush our souls, it's often because we're trying to validate our own sense of worth by proving to ourselves that we're attractive enough to hold someone's interest. What we tend to overlook in these situations is the underlying emotional pattern driving our behavior, a deep-seated fear of being truly alone, which can be so overwhelming, we're willing to settle for toxic relationships in order to avoid the uncertainty of being single again. Our desire for validation often stems from a profound sense of insecurity, which stems from a lack of self-worth that we're desperate to compensate for by getting the approval of others. We frequently mistake attraction for love, when in reality, it's often a complex mix of infatuation, curiosity, or even a deep-seated need for control, as we try to impose our own sense of order on a chaotic world. At its core, being drawn to people who will hurt us is often a reflection of our own inner struggles, a desperate attempt to escape the pain and anxiety that resides within us, rather than confronting and resolving those issues head-on. What's truly remarkable, and often disturbing, is the degree to which we're willing to self-deceive in order to justify our involvement in these toxic relationships, often convincing ourselves that we're the ones who are crazy, rather than acknowledging the role our own flaws and insecurities play in perpetuating the cycle. We often justify our attraction to toxic relationships as a natural part of the romantic experience, but deep down, we're seeking validation and a sense of belonging, often at the expense of our own well-being. In these relationships, our partners may mirror our deepest insecurities, playing on our fears to gain control, not understanding that by doing so, they are not fixing our problems, but rather exacerbating them. It's a subtle but insidious dance where we give up pieces of ourselves in the hopes of being seen, heard, and accepted, only to find ourselves increasingly fragmented and disillusioned with our own choices. We convince ourselves that our partners are worthy of our love, that they are worth fighting for, even when logic tells us otherwise, all because our egos have become deeply invested in the idea that we can change them, that we can salvage what's irreparably broken. The real issue isn't that we're attracting unhealthy partners, but rather that we're choosing to stay in relationships that reinforce our deepest insecurities and fears, because on some fundamental level they make us feel seen, even if it's a twisted, toxic form of attention. Thanks for watching and confronting the dark truth within yourself. Before you go, take a moment to think, have you ever found yourself inexplicably drawn to relationships or people that consistently drain and harm you? Remember, knowledge is power, so like this video, comment below with your observation, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of the human psyche.